Chapter 9. The Separate Self. We have already covered part of these teachings in other chapters. But even though some of the writing in this chapter is just a bit redundant, it offers a great deal more clarification and other information from the ancient Atlantean teachings. In hot water. It was in my second year, and I had developed a deep bond with my teacher Zane. But at this point in my evolution and learning, he could still really shake me up and throw me for a loop when he wanted to, which he did from time to time as part of the process of helping me change and grow. Obviously, he decided I needed to consider changing something about myself, or understanding something I was not really getting, because one day he stopped me on the way to the hot pool, and said quite sternly and loudly, in his intensity mode, "Have you ever asked this about your life or the world in general? Why so much suffering and destruction?" I was just on my way. He had that intense fire in his eyes. I hesitated for a moment, trying to think of what to say or do. Then I decided I better just simply answer his question. I struggled past being stunned for a moment, so I could actually think about his question before I answered. We just stood there while he waited for my answer. Then it finally came out after a few seconds that seemed like years. "Yes. Of course I have, Father. I asked it often, even when I was young, and it always perplexed me. Then one day I guess I just sort of gave up, thinking there was nothing I could do about it anyway." Accurately identifying the problem is the first step towards finding any solution. So what is the problem? The separate self is the problem. Then he walked off as if he'd just only said, "Top of the morning to ya," as we passed in the streets of Dublin. Well, later that day, I stalked him. I waited until he was on the way to the pool himself, and then when the time was just perfect, I pounced. I stopped him and asked, "So," I said, "what's the problem?" "No problem." "No. You said the separate self is the problem." "Yes." "Well, you can't just say that to me and leave it at that." "Yes, I can." "But why did you do that? Why did you say it that way, and just leave me hanging? Is there a problem with me?" "Certainly." "Well? Okay. You think you got me. Tag. You're it. Now we'll get you back. First go to the library, ask Gabriel for the English translation book from the Tablets of Amelius. Pick it up in front of him, hold it in your hand, and let it fall open where it may. Read the pages it falls open to. Then do the same with the Book of Zoroaster and Zen. Then the same with the translations of the Book of the Scrolls of the Old Testament of the Bible. Then the same with the scrolls of the Quran and unaltered New Testament. Read the pages each falls to. Then also read the following texts. He went on to give me my reading list for what looked like a month. Here are some of the most significant highlights. The spiritual self came to be as the one divided within itself. Created then were infinite multiplicities of the one, still one with the one. Consciousness of oneness remained. Separate self-consciousness came to be as the separate self moved deeper into the matter of earth. Vibration fell into density and fragmentation with polarization into male and female. The opposites repelled. The positive lost receptivity. The receptive turned from the positive. Polarity misdirected, the flow waned chaotic. Severed in consciousness from the one, the way was lost. The separate self only has life in separation. Separation is an illusion that the separate self works to maintain. The monkey mind serves to keep away the stillness that reveals the light of truth and oneness. In the illusion of separateness from the one, Ahura Mazda, the separate self believes and behaves in ways that are not harmonious in the flow of the one. Such disharmony causes suffering, both for the separate self and others. The separate self turned within instead of without, began the way of take instead of give. Thus was the birth of selfishness. Then came to be the selfish separate self, the master of selfishness, the pawn of darkness. Selfishness the root of all evil, all ignorance, all wrongs, all pain and suffering. Greed, hate, jealousy, envy, vanity and lust, call thee each by thy true name selfishness. Theft, brutality, war, and famine exist not without selfishness. The selfish separate self is a creature of our own design. It disdains love, shuns the light, fears the truth. The selfish separate self lives against the one. It lives a lie. It survives only in illusion. It lives only to serve itself, and its masters the darkness and the lords of darkness. It relishes ignorance. With its self-centered gaze it is blind. The selfish separate self is insane. Terrified of death, yet it often accelerates its demise. Wants to avoid suffering, yet it often creates it. Wants to fulfill its every desire, yet it often prevents their attainment. It suffocates itself with its own blind taking, and destroys its own source of life. The selfish separate self controls the mind and twists the truth. It can avoid God by searching for God. It can avoid love by looking for love. Your selfish separate self is the most terrible demon you will ever see. Transcend its grip, and you will be free. Your selfish separate self will frighten you. When you look it in the eye, greet it with true love, and it will die from the ashes of its grave. Like the sun it will rise, born anew. Separate no longer to serve your true self and the will of the one. As a servant, its proper place it finds peace and happiness. Thusly do the great enemies become allies as one. The one becomes two, the two become three, the two beget four, and begins the more. Within and without, torn between and against, mirrors on all sides, split inside and out, again and again. Thus is the ignorant self, to be whole again, to be home again. Only the weary learn, only the bleeding heart returns. To be whole with the one again is the great goal, the great mountain we can climb with our will. For those who take power over their selfish separate self will return and be wholly one. The holy ones use the power of love, sacrifice their selfish separate self, and make to give. Thusly did they find their spiritual self again. Thusly do they forever walk with the peace of the whole, and in their holiness are a blessing to all. What's the problem? Zayn could not have made his point any clearer had he beaten me over the head with the texts from one of the ancient copper or stone tablets. But I still sensed he was trying to get me to realize something else I hadn't gotten yet, with all of these teachings about the separate self. I thought I'd gotten it. But maybe I just really hadn't gotten it. I just felt like I was in hot water, and I didn't know why, and it wasn't the pleasant hot water of the pool. I went to the entrance of his chambers, and stood there for a moment, timidly. I was afraid. Unjustifiably, of course, but I never knew that until the end, so I was still afraid. Of what? I didn't even know. Finally, I knocked, and awaited what I had created in my mind as the dreaded answer and opening of the door. His soul mate, Mira, answered the door. He's expecting you, Penuel. He'll just be a moment. I'll come back and get you when he's ready. I can go and come back later. I crossed my fingers in my mind that she would agree. Thank you. But no, that won't be necessary, it will just be a moment. Yeah, a moment during a root canal. Just a moment. Mira was beautiful inside and out. A sweet, gentle, caring woman. She was in constant great pain from a cancerous tumor that she had growing in her before she came to the monastery, yet she was always still so sweet and kind. Years went by, and then the door opened again, and she waved me into the room as she left for the kitchen. Zayn's chambers were like a scene from Arabian Nights or something. It always put me on the edge of having past life memories somehow. There were embroidered silk brocades and chiffon artfully draped throughout the room, covering the walls and hanging from the ceiling also. It wasn't that it was opulent really, they were all natural fabrics, traded for cheaply and easily placed with anyone with a good interior decorators since from 600 BC. But it felt so opulent anyway. Sitting pillows were everywhere, and a half-dozen sleeping mats lined one wall. He had a single chair, which he usually only sat in when formally teaching or lecturing. Today he was sitting in his chair. "How is she doing?" I asked, inquiring about Mira's cancer. "Fine. She has been eating nothing but mangoes for 3 weeks now, and does not like the sight of them anymore. But it will cure her cancer along with the energy work we are doing." I was quite nervous and tried to say something important. "We are fortunate to have our own trees." "It is not fortune. Don't you realize they are here for a reason?" "Oh boy, stupid thing to say," I thought to myself. I shifted from that blooper quickly, and tried to recover the fumble by just going on as if nothing was said. "She seems in good spirits. She knows it is working and won't be long now." I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to get blunt. "Father, what is the problem? With me, I mean? Why are you having me read all these texts on the separate self?" "Because you need to." "Well, I understand that, but I think I get the point. You have a huge ego, Peniel. You think you are humble, you think you have inner peace, you think you are kind and unviolating to others, but in reality you lack it all. You think you get the point, but you don't really." I was nailed to the wall by his words. I didn't know what to say, think or do. It was very upsetting, to say the least, to think that I was not what I thought I had always been. And that I had not accomplished what I thought I did. As my mind spun, he went on. "Not that a big ego is bad. It is actually good in a way. It just needs to be in the service of God. The bigger the ego, the more power a true teacher has to help others. You will someday be initiated, become an adept, and again be the great teacher you have been in the past, with the great power that accompanies that. But only after you harness your ego, and it serves God, not your selfish separate self. Look at the world. It is a reflection of this problem in you, in everyone. The selfish separate self. We could be living in paradise, a beautiful, harmonious world of peace, happiness, and creativity. And you could be happy and full of feelings of peace and harmony. But there is obviously a problem. A serious problem. In the world and in you. Maybe you can realize it easier inside yourself, if you see it better in a world perspective first." I just managed a nod. "Consider the condition of the known world, past and present. Humankind has invented amazing things. Is that not so?" Nod. "But many of these seeming wonders are harmful to the earth and its inhabitants. And if you stop and think about it, the greatest advances have been made in the invention of new and wonderful ways to harm others. And humans have always done the greatest harm they could with their available means and weaponry. Have you not seen this in your history lessons?" Nod. "But in the past they didn't have the technology we have today. They simply weren't able to commit the kind of mass destruction that modern means allow. Now we can destroy the people and ecology of an entire planet. The barbaric ancestors of some humans would have done the same thing, had they gotten the chance. Even with crude means they still did atrocious things on grand scales, including genocide of entire races. Witness the inquisitions that burned hundreds of thousands alive, after being tortured, not to mention vicious wars and enslavement of entire countries. And look at what is happening right now." I finally relaxed and began listening and hearing. He was right as usual, including about how humans today are basically not much different from their ancestors, even though they think they are. There was that think thing again, that he was referring to me about. All the violence, destruction, and inhumanity had just gone more underground, become more controlled, and media controlled. I thought to myself, not long ago, my father fought in World War II when Hitler waged his mass destruction, and cruel genocide. It was big news. It's over and gone, right? That kind of thing isn't going on in the world anymore, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Zane was right. Similar atrocities are still occurring, but they are virtually ignored by all the countries and societies of the world. Can you imagine having a 9-month baby cut out of your womb by a soldier's filthy bayonet because they don't want your race to continue? People all over the world are still being routinely suppressed in virtual slavery. The major powers of the world are undergoing economic and social disintegration. Crime and hatred actually are on the rise and grow daily. And if you think torture is passé, or hasn't kept up with technology, just check with Amnesty International. Like Zane said, modern humankind has the unique capability of total annihilation. Advanced weapons of all kinds, including biological, chemical, nuclear, and particle beam devices, allow war to be waged on a scale that dwarfs anything in the past, and have the capability to destroy much more than just human life. It could destroy most life on Earth. And he was right, they have never developed a weapon that went unused. But warfare directed at other people is not the only means humans now have to achieve total annihilation. Humans have waged a sort of war on animals also, wiping out entire species for direct profit, or as a side effect of other ventures. They have waged war on nature also, wiping out great forests, killing oceans and the creatures there, creating holes in the atmosphere, and ultimately forcing the extinction of species at an incredible rate. I think the last time I heard it was something like 180 species per day, depending on the statistics you use. The imbalances created by humans have affected everything on Earth. Now new mutant diseases are on the loose. Climatic changes are beginning to alter the environment with floods and droughts that will soon cause famine as weather makes food growing difficult to impossible. Scientists have now discovered that many animals, including some fish, are being born neither male or female. That means that this will be the last generation for many species. Human male sperm count is down 40% since World War II. How long before humans will not be able to reproduce either? Many people live in denial of these harsh realities of the world because of their fear. And because of that fear, they have embraced unrealistic spiritual beliefs such as if you don't think bad things or believe they can happen, you won't empower them, thus they won't happen. Thoughts can affect things. But if that were true, how do you explain a baby getting sick from getting into something poisonous under a kitchen sink? The baby has no thoughts or beliefs about it one way or the other. And even if an adult isn't around, it will get sick and can die. Something to think about. But I am getting off the story, even though it is a related and important point. So let's go back in time again, and get back to me sweating in Zane's chambers. I was still wondering and thinking to myself, but what did this have to do with me? I wasn't contributing to any of these atrocities. I spoke up, somewhat in my own defense. Of course I agree with you, Father, but what is the problem with me? I would never do such things. All of these wide-scale, disastrous imbalances and harms are not coming from the way of life of dolphins, bears, insects, snakes, etc. Only humans are so out of touch with the nature of things. Now that humans have the ability to end all life as we know it, they are doing so, even to the extent that it will cause their own extinction. A bit extreme, don't you think? A bit blind? Why would normally non-suicidal people act this way? You are human, are you not, Peña? I live in a human body, Father, yes, but you still are. It still controls you. Humans didn't need to be the creators of all these problems that plague the earth. So why have they been? Why do they continue to be? Why do they behave in ways so extreme that they will even cause their own extinction? Is money the problem? Is greed the problem? Is hate the problem? Is jealousy the problem? Well, yes, but... You initially answered yes, so then answer this also: what causes hate, greed, and jealousy, etc. Such negative and destructive desires and emotions are the virtues of, so to speak, selfishness. And they are caused by having a separate self. The separate self's blind selfishness is so out of control that it doesn't even consider that it's creating its own demise. But why? What do the teachings of the Atlantean children say about these things? How can we change it and stop it? Personal problems. My mind was reeling at all this. What could I say? What could I do? Questions began filling my mind about it. Be patient, Peñol, all your questions will be answered in time. Thus far, I've talked about the great problems of the world on a grand scale, but think. All these things are caused by individual humans. What does that mean? It is inside, it is the natural effect of selfishness. If they are an internal problem in each human, then you can see them in each small life, true? That makes sense. So let's look at the individual now, because they are the only source of the big problems. Most people have their share of personal problems. They are microcosms of the world's problems. Some people's lives are constantly filled with discord and pain, and they can't escape suffering. Others are able to fill their minds, and the days of their lives, with distractions, entertainment, work, or whatever, to create an illusion that glazes over the pain of their problems. Some get involved in play wars, through competitive sports. But at best, living that way only delays the pain and suffering they have created in their own lives, and almost always makes things even worse. Life keeps catching up to them, piercing their illusions, and leveling them with pain from time to time. Now, you say, what is the problem with you, son? Do you have problems in your personal life? I had a quick comeback to that question, just waiting up my sleeve. I guess I was no longer afraid or threatened by this meeting with Zane. Do politicians give speeches? I said. Yes. I believe they do. But let's stay on the subject, he replied. I guess he didn't get the joke, or the joke was on me, more likely. The point is, this personal problems come from the same place that the world's problems do. What can we do about them? Attacking the problems themselves never works for long. First, we must discover the root cause and eradicate that. The way to find a solution to a problem is to really identify the source of the problem. Our primary task, then, is to get a clear understanding of what has created all these terrible problems on Earth. To understand the cause of all our problems, we need to go back to the beginning. Way back. The origin of the universe and the separate self. With new proof to support the Big Bang Theory, modern scientific discoveries have substantiated what the children have known since the beginning of life on Earth, that the universe began from one thing, and that all creation came from, and still really is, that one thing, expanding throughout space, creating stars, planets, and all life. Zane got out an old drawing to demonstrate this ancient understanding, and began to explain it to me. A mandala is a round piece of geometric art, created for its spiritual symbolism, and sometimes used for meditation, he said. But it is far more than art. It is a graphic, spiritual representation of the One, and a symbol of the expansion and oneness of the universe into its many parts. A mandala's design consists of a myriad of many interconnected individual forms coming out of one single, central source. A mandala is a good representation of our becoming separate individuals, yet still remaining one with the one universal spirit, or God. This concept, or spiritual principle, is also sometimes symbolically represented as a tree, many parts springing forth from a central source. Beyond roots. I understood a number of things better as I looked at and contemplated this drawing. The ancient teachings of the children talk about a time when we were just spiritual or angelic beings. Using the mandala to represent this, we would be like the outer rings of the mandala that are individual, perhaps far from the source, yet still interconnected, still one. But when we wanted to manifest, materialize, on Earth, we had to do so within the framework of the vibrational spectrum of physical life on Earth, which was a far slower and denser vibrational plane than the plane of light and thought that we were existing on at the time. The nature of the spectrum of physical life on Earth is a myriad of individual forms, far more elaborate than we can even draw in a mandala. It also involves dichotometric separation, the splitting of one thing into two parts with opposing polarities. Many of the things that exist in this Earth plane reflect this dichotometric separation, i.e., temperature is one constant, yet it is manifested to us as seemingly polar opposites. Hot and cold, lightning and electricity involve positive and negative polar opposite charges. There are a great variety of animal species, each with polar opposite sexes, male and female. There are two sides and polar opposites to almost everything in one way or another. Thus our manifesting on Earth required individual forms and dichotometric separation, which to us meant a great deal, which I will explain in a moment. But aren't the polarities universal law anyway? Why would coming into the Earth plane make that any different, or turn it into a problem? The polarities outside this plane are in harmony, connected, flowing as one. Thus they are one, not separate. They only become polarities when they separate from their connection, which is a never-ending flow in one direction. As I said, in coming into this material world, we needed to manifest in individual forms and lower our vibration to match the environment. Like water vapor, whose molecules must vibrationally slow down and get more dense in order to become ice, we lowered our vibration, slowed our vibration, until we achieved our goal. And as we manifested physically, the greater the depth of integration into the physical plane, our consciousness became more and more limited rather than universal, and the greater was the separation from the one. This also created greater separation within ourselves. And separate polarization without the right connection, the right order of flow. Do you know what happens if you put batteries in backwards, or if you touch electrical wires to each other the wrong way? Well, I know I've done it, and either things don't work or sparks fly, and you can even cause explosions and fires. Humans live that way. When we entered this plane of dualities and polar opposites, we changed greatly from our previous spirit forms. We were no longer angelic beings with self-contained energy flows. Our internal male and female elements had once been so fully integrated that there was not even a concept of male or female. But with the manifestation into the physical plane, these elements dichotomized, dividing into male and female polar opposite parts, now soulmates. Eventually, as we manifested deeply into this dichotometric material plane, we physically became separate male and female beings. The dichotomy affected each male and female being even further, and in many ways. Our previously integrated mind, with logic/intellect and intuition/emotion functioning as one within the one, became left and right hemispheres of a brain that divided logic and intuition. The minds of these male and female selves became dominated by either logic/intellect or intuition/emotion. As degeneration/lowering of vibration and consciousness occurred further, the males generally became more logic/intellect oriented, and the females more intuition/emotion oriented. Logic and intuition were no longer functioning in balance, as one within the one. And the two halves are in opposition rather than in flow. That's one reason males and females don't understand each other, and often argue. The big breakup. This lowering of vibration and separating from the one went too far. For an example, think of the universe as a great single continent, surrounded by a dense dark fog. We are land in that continent. If we are a peninsula, we might stretch way out from the continent, and be surrounded by the dark fog, but as long as we still have a tiny piece of land connecting our peninsula to the continent, we are still the continent, and have all the life of that continent. But if we totally separate, we become an island. A tiny island, all alone, not even able to see that there is anything else out there other than ourselves, and all that dark fog. Or, let's use the mandala representation again. Think of it as the very outer parts of the mandala, actually separating. They lose their connection. They lose their universal consciousness, and subsequently, its peace, its awareness, its coordination, and its guidance. They lose everything that being one with God had to offer. They are no longer in the flow of things. They also lose harmony and peace with the other parts that have separated. The self reverses polarity. Upon separating from the one, the separate self turns its attention to itself. Since the separate self's attention is directed towards itself, attention is directed inward rather than outward, and the direction of mental energy is thus inward, negative polarity / vacuum / taking, rather than outward, positive polarity / outflowing / giving. This puts it out of harmony with universal flow and order. This inward direction naturally then gave birth to a way of being, a selfishness. Selfishness is virtually a path, a way of being. It is the way of being taking. It's the way of inward flow, of negative flow, like being a black hole, whose gravity is so great that it sucks everything into itself, even light. Thus we have the selfish separate self. And from that, all our personal problems, and the world's problems originate? Just examine it, and see for yourself. In placing attention on and giving energy to the selfish separate self, we turn away from being receptive to the outflowing source of universal consciousness, and maintain a selfish separate self-consciousness. Self-indulgence is then simply the natural outcome, the natural order of things once the selfish separate self has established itself with its own consciousness, and the individual's focus and attention feed that consciousness. It has lost awareness of its connection with its spiritual nature, and thusly, the universal spirit and universal consciousness. I understand. But why is it so hard for people to see and change? Seeing is one thing. Changing is another. In so becoming cut off from the universal spirit, the source of creation, humanity has become blind in a sense. No longer aware that we are all one, people act as the negative polarity they look to take and get, rather than give, as is the way of the positive polarity. It's look out for number one rather than a love thy neighbor approach to their brothers and sisters. This negative, selfish way of being creates more negativity, pain, and suffering for all, including the separate self. What went so wrong? Exactly how did this all happen? Since all the matter, all the stuff of the universe, is in reality one stuff, nothing can truly be separate from the one universe, but humans gradually became separate from the one as far as their awareness, their consciousness, was concerned. It's as if mirrored walls surrounded each individual self. All each self primarily saw all the time was itself, and everything else it saw had to first be reflected in the mirror of the separate self. This gave birth to an illusion, a belief, that they were indeed separate, which gave birth to a new kind of total separate self-identity. This is where human consciousness still is today. So this is what you're saying my problem is, and what I need to deal with so badly right now. Does it not exist in only you? You think you are it. You think you are the separate self. The separate identity naturally has primary awareness of itself. After all, it lives in a room full of mirrors. Its focus is on itself. Its attention is on itself. It is thus self-centered. Each self actually has the notion that it is the center of the universe. Don't you? People won't admit it naturally, but isn't everything you see, feel, and think reflected off the mirror of yourself? Don't you always relate everything that happens around you to how it affects you? It's only natural unless you have universal consciousness. This is even affecting how you are functioning as a member of this monastery. I don't understand. Have I done something wrong? Of course, how could it be any other way with your present limited consciousness? But I understand that. That is not the issue now, that is not the big picture I want you to get first, that you are still not getting. Think for a moment what kind of problems there would be if the members of a football team no longer had team consciousness, group consciousness. No coordination, no guidance from a central source, not even any awareness of what the other players were going to do each play. And what if they weren't even in harmony with their team in general, and would sometimes play for the opposing team? And then add selfishness into the factor. Each player considered themselves the most important player in the world, wanted to be the star, wanted all the attention, with no real concern as to whether the entire team would win? Or what if the members of an orchestra were unaware of what the other players were playing and didn't even care? Take these kinds of problems to a far greater level, to a team so large it encompasses everything in the universe. That gives you just some idea of how bad having a lack of universal consciousness is. On a smaller scale even, consider what would happen if just your arms and legs left the guidance, coordination and consciousness of the entirety of your body. Then they got their own identity, and developed selfish separate selves. You would have such things as one hand trying to put on a glove in a snowstorm, not caring what happened to the other hand. And the legs would be doing their own thing at the same time. What chaos! Again, just look around at the condition of the world to see the chaos here. So this isn't about some problem I have, or something I did wrong or I'm in trouble about. Yes and no. Stop persisting in this self-centeredness and listen. Yes, it is about you. No, it isn't about you. Get out of yourself and you will see the point. You are living in a delusion, Peñol. Serious delusion. Engrave this in your mind. It is so important. The Atlantean children of the Law of One teach that the world's problems are personal problems, and all the actions that create the problems come from our delusion that we are separate from the One, and the selfishness that results from that delusion. Think about it, Peñol. Would there be wars if we knew we were one, if all you could do was fight and hurt yourself? No, exactly, because what is the point of hurting yourself, or waging war on yourself? Would there be oppression? None. Because what is the point of oppressing yourself? Would there be anger? Jealousy? Theft? Starvation? Racial hatred? No. It wouldn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Think about all the problems I just mentioned. What is behind each one of them? Humans, yes, but what is behind their problem-causing actions? You already know, but you will need to teach the masses someday. Don't let them get caught in the surface illusions. Don't let them think the problem is greed, because what's the source of greed? Selfishness. Don't let them think the problem is hate. What's the source of hate? Selfishness. Proclaim it for all to see. Tell them in your book, in your meetings. Help them clearly and finally understand that the real problem, the real enemy, the real source of all the bad things on earth is simply selfish people acting selfishly. And it is up to each person to change themselves, not the world. That is the only way to change the world. Each of us is a selfish person acting selfishly. We are thus our own enemy. And going further to the root of the matter, what is behind selfishness? Thinking you are separate from everything else. Then looking out for number one begins. And when you have a whole world full of people looking out for number one, you can see the results. Just turn to the news. Sleeping with our enemy. Like the ancient Atlantean teachings say, and Zane so intensely drove home in me, in order to permanently eradicate this selfish monster that plagues us all, and plagues the world, we must get to the root of it. If you want to permanently kill a plant, and ensure that it won't grow back again, you need to destroy the root. At the root of selfishness is our illusion that we are not one with all things, all life, the entire universe, and our subsequent belief that this illusion is real. This belief created a new identity, and supports the existence of this new separate identity, that is naturally selfish, and therein lies the enemy. But our belief is a lie. The illusion is not real. It is like we are all asleep, and thus out of touch with the reality of the real awake world that is around our sleeping body. We are each sleeping with this enemy we created. We remain unconscious, letting our enemy command the helm of the ship of our lives like a dream we have no control over. Meanwhile, our spiritual self, the part of us that is one with the universal spirit, is locked up in the brig and just forced to go along on the voyage like so much baggage. This is something that each of us must personally come to deal with, and then be on alert about, each moment of all our days on earth. But you cannot fight your selfish separate self directly, it only gives it energy. What do the Atlantean children of the Law of One's teachings say about how we must deal with it if we wanted to change? They say that the only way to change things and get back in harmony with the One is to starve the selfish separate self of energy of giving into it, of thought attention, and simultaneously nurture the inner being, the spirit within us. And this requires help. My greatest help was primarily Zane and his insight into me, combined with his wisdom. And only secondarily, the ancient teachings. So I need to be less self-centered? Zane just sighed. Then after a few moments, he spoke. You need more help. You need to use the resources you have at your disposal to see yourself more, to know yourself better, and meditate on that to deal with it. More on that later. But eventually I finally got it. I had not been looking at my self-centeredness enough. I was avoiding the things I needed to do to break those self-mirrors that totally surrounded me in the room of my life. The self-mirrors that I thus saw all things reflected off of first, instead of seeing pure objective reality. I didn't know myself. And he, as all true teachers do, was mirroring my inner self, and not letting me get away with my delusion. He was simply reminding me about it, and helping me deal with what I needed, in order to realize my continued self-deception. Know yourself? The separate self is a very clever thing. And it has the ability of a supercomputer. It has your brain at its disposal. It has all the knowledge you have. All the cleverness and cunning you have. It can lie and confuse even you. People delude themselves all the time. It has control of everything you control. Like Sherlock Holmes, you must anticipate every step of Moriarty if you want to beat him at his own game. Obviously then, knowing the intricacies and modes of operation of yourself is a key to many things. You must know yourself in order to transcend yourself and regain universal consciousness. And if you truly understand yourself, you will know all other selves, for all selves are the same, and they behave the same way. For instance, how can you understand anger in another if you don't understand it in yourself? And when you thus know and understand all selves, you will really understand the world. Thus understanding others allows you to bridge the gap of separation, and help them achieve universal consciousness also. Allows you to bridge the gap of separation, and help them achieve universal consciousness also. When you truly know yourself, see your own selfishness, transcend it, and become a person who loves unselfishly, then you will clearly understand the selfishness in others, and the unselfish love in others. You will see both aspects simultaneously, and as a whole. How to fully know and transcend yourself will be addressed in the chapter on the teacher/student relationship. Right now we need to cover more of the basics of what the selfish separate self is, and how it affects our lives, so we can totally understand it. The consciousness scale. Each person has the potential to be both selfish and to unselfishly love. Imagine there is a meter that has a scale with selfishness, negativity, on the left, and unselfish love, positivity, on the right. Your consciousness is the needle on this meter. Most people act selfishly most of the time, and sometimes act unselfishly, so the needle jumps around a bit. But everyone has a status quo of sorts where the needle stays most of the time. This average location of the needle represents the general level of their state of consciousness. The consciousness scale. Each person has the potential to be both selfish and to unselfishly love. Imagine there is a meter that has a scale with selfishness, negativity, on the left, and unselfish love, positivity, on the right. Your consciousness is the needle on this meter. Most people act selfishly most of the time, and sometimes act unselfishly, so the needle jumps around a bit. But everyone has a status quo of sorts where the needle stays most of the time. This average location of the needle represents the general level of their state of consciousness. 3 makes a whole dot as if separation from the 1 didn't cause enough problems alone. The separate self is further separated within itself. And the lower an individual's consciousness is, the more that there are internal separation problems. You may have noticed how numbers and a certain mathematical geometry seem to weave threads throughout life, and are somehow significant to many things. This has to do with the vibratory nature of existence, and is discussed more in a later manuscript, but it also applies in the following teachings. But in any case, here are some obvious scientific facts, and some teachings about our 2- and 3-fold natures. Some aspects of ourselves divided into 2 parts. There is the selfish/unselfish split parts we just spoke of, the male/female split, the logic/intuition split, the intellect/emotion split, the positive/negative split. And the 2 split parts are often at odds with each other. Some people, regardless of sex, are more right-brained, and others more left-brained. Still, other aspects of ourselves are divided into 3 parts, which we are about to discuss. All creation itself has a 3-fold nature. Within the 3-fold nature, we can also see the 2-fold dichotomy of the material plane. These natures can be looked at and thought of in many different ways. But here is the fundamental concept. The first nature is light, the positive polarity, plus. The second nature is darkness, the negative polarity. The third nature is the interaction, or intercourse of darkness and light as a whole. The 3-fold nature has been represented by various religions in various ways. The yin and yang, dark and light interacting in a circle. The Father, Son and Holy Ghost, etc. 4 represented in many ways, such as the cross, the tetragrammaton, the oldest name of God, indicates the offspring of the 3, and the beginning of a new cycle of creation. This will be covered in depth in a later chapter. Since we are really part of, and one with, all creation, each of us individually is also of a 3-fold nature. This 3-fold human nature manifests in many ways. The 3-fold essential vibratory nature of our human manifestation is spiritual, mental, and physical. You can also see it in the nature of our consciousness, in that called the subconscious mind, the conscious mind, and the universal conscious mind. The balance and coordination of the 3-fold nature has been, and still is, lost with most people. A 2-fold dichotomy is the dominant nature of our material existence on earth. Thus few ever really relate to the spiritual, but all relate to the mental and physical. Also few ever relate to the universal consciousness, but all relate to the subconscious and conscious minds. If we were as we should be, our inner being would be coordinating these parts of ourselves, and they would be functioning as an integrated whole. And ordinarily the universal spirit would be guiding the entire process, keeping us functioning harmoniously within ourselves, and in harmony with the One. But because our consciousness is cut off from the universal spirit, and we are not properly in touch with our own inner being, we are an uncoordinated internal mess. Obviously, we need to recoordinate all these fragments of self. We achieve this as a natural side effect of transcending selfishness by developing and fostering our unselfish love for others. The process is also aided by various techniques and exercises, described later in the book, that coordinate the subconscious, conscious, and universal minds. For those who achieve reunification with the universal spirit, paradise awaits. Making a new world. As we pointed out earlier, when you have a whole world full of people who selfishly care more about themselves than others, you have a world such as it is today. But on the bright side, can you imagine what it would be like if we all cared for each other more than ourselves? Contemplate that for a while. That's what the children teach and work for. The ancient Atlantean teachings also proclaim that those who want to help change the world for the better must first change themselves and transform into unselfishly loving beings. It takes a fire of some kind at least to light a fire, The children's ancient Atlantean teachings say that if you want to live in a world of loving people, be a loving person. They also teach that one of the ways to achieve this is to put others before yourself, to love others first, to consider others first, to give to others first. There is no way anyone could not love themselves then. You would love yourself automatically and feel great about yourself, because your unselfish love is of great help to all, including yourself. This is also the only way you can unselfishly love yourself, and unselfish love is truly the only real love. There is a law of one in action here. Let me reiterate the faucet anecdote to illustrate this. Try to see it like this: we are like one who needs and wants water, love, we are valves, faucets, connected to a water supply. When we let the water flow freely giving it out, it is also flowing in us and through us. But if we try to possess our water by shutting off our giving, not letting the water flow on through us, we shut off our own supply, for it is no longer in us. This is truly loving yourself, not first, not second, it is simultaneous just by giving it, doing it. Here is a parable from a scroll I found in the library, written in the 1st century AD, by an early Christian sect in Greece. Judging from the insightful story, this sect apparently were real Christians, i.e., people that followed Jesus' teachings and living example about unselfish loving rather than merely worshiping and praising Jesus. The story uses a striking allegorical fantasy to clearly illustrate a fundamental difference between a world of people looking out for themselves first and a world of people giving first. There was a man who died and was being taken to heaven by angels. The angels said to him, "We are going to take you to heaven, but first we will show you hell." The angels then took him to a place where there was a great bowl, so great that it was as big as a lake. The bowl was filled with a nutritious stew. All the way around the sides of this bowl were people. Emaciated, starving, miserable people. These people had spoons to eat the stew with, and the spoons were long enough to reach the stew, about 12 feet. The trouble was, while they could scoop up the stew into the spoon, they could not get it into their mouths, because the spoons were too long. So here were all these pathetic people, suffering and moaning in agony, constantly trying to eat the food that was abundantly in front of them, all in vain. Next, the angels took the man to heaven. To his surprise, he saw the same scene. There it was, a giant lake-like bowl of the same stew, surrounded by people with 12-foot-long spoons. Yet something was different here. All these people were smiling, happy, and healthy-looking. Why? What is the difference here that these people are happy and well-fed? The man said to the angels. They replied, "Have you not eyes to see?" The man looked more carefully, and observed that one person would scoop up the stew, and bring it to the mouth of another. Then someone else would scoop up stew and feed it to the other. The angels smiled and said, "Here the people feed each other. Here are the people that learned the way of love." Some of you agree with the idea expressed in the parable, and would like to live that way, yet you find yourself questioning the practicality of doing something like that. It's not unreasonable to think something like this: but if I give all for others, I will surely be taken advantage of and have nothing. If that is your quandary, take heart, there is a way. It may seem too idealistic or impractical to you right now to stop thinking selfishly. And in a way, you may be right. It is a bad idea to change yourself into a being who gives and lives for others without discretion. Giving to selfish people can sometimes do the people you're giving to more harm than good. There are plenty who will selfishly take, and there needs to be discretion as to who to give to, and how. But there are ways around having to deal with this when you are in a transitional and learning phase. That is part of what having a monastic period in your life, and or living in a monastery/spiritual community is all about, discussed more in later chapters.